Hi, welcome to Healing the Trauma Within. In this session, I am talking with Rollie, Allaire, and we are talking about moving past the anxiety, something I think most of us trauma survivors definitely deal with on a regular basis. Let me tell you a little bit about Rollie. She is a holistic life and wellness coach. Since 2001, Rollie has drawn on her extensive career background of clinical psychotherapy skills and, in recent years, combine that with energy work, chakra work, crystal Reiki, theta healing, and Akashic record reading and clearings, meditation, moon medicine teachings, and looking at life through the medicine wheel in the form of coaching and facilitating. She helps women with anxiety by giving them the ability to soulfully master their emotions, connect to their true power, and learn to feel better in order to take massive action in their life so that they gain confidence, feel self-assured, strong, happy, and surround themselves with a supportive, connected community when they feel most isolated. Rollie hosts both local and online groups, creating safe spaces for women to experience deep, life-changing transformation and healing. Welcome, Rollie.
Thank you so much for having me, Tracy. This is an honor.
I'm thrilled to have you here. So we're talking about anxiety. I just had an anxiety attack yesterday, so how fitting. Let's talk a little bit about what anxiety means, or what it is, and how it kind of presents.
So anxiety is normal, and so everybody in the world has experienced anxiety. But for those of us who struggle with anxiety, is probably why this is a little bit more prevalent, and we seem to be seeing more and more people that are struggling with anxiety. But one of the things from my background and working with people is that I see a lot more people that have come from a trauma experience, that I have not yet met anybody who has come from a trauma experience that doesn't experience anxiety in some form, whether it is to the extreme or a milder version of it. But anxiety is our natural response for out of fear, right? So like that is what's supposed to happen when there's something that is frightening, so that we have that fight, flight, or freeze response, which is normal for our body to be able to respond. But when we're coming from a trauma response, or from someone who's had anxiety, is that it is we kind of get in a stuck mode, and so then we're constantly on this alert. We've got this vigilance that's happening, and as you shared, is that sometimes it takes us into a panic state, and then our body goes into this natural response of responding to what it is that's going on. So a really good example for me is that with COVID and having to wear masks, is that whenever I have to put that mask on, I end up in a trauma response. And so it doesn't matter how often that I do it, or how often that I've practiced it, or all the things that I'm doing, my body physically goes into a trauma response. And so then being able to calm my body down is something that I need to make sure that I'm very conscious of. And with the mask, it's something that at least I can remove, but it takes me into that space on a regular basis. And so it's really important for me to be able to be mindful of when I am going into a place, that I'm remembering to do some breathing, that I'm being able to slow down the trauma response that I do have. So I'm not sure if that makes sense in terms of what it is that I'm explaining or describing for people.
It makes absolute sense. And I found, for me, when anxiety presents itself, I have, a rapid heartbeat. I almost feel like I have drank too much coffee. I'm just like, in that jittery,
the sweaty palms, the slow breath, like fast. Fast heart rate. A lot of times we actually look flushed because we don't necessarily feel it. Or I know I do. Like when my blood pressure goes up, I do feel it. But like somebody else, like it's very visible to other people when that's happening. And I think, at least for me, is like that shortness of breath is probably the one that is most fearful, right? So as part of our normal body responses, and when we are in a position or in a situation where we are in danger, it's so that the rapid heart rate and the slower breaths allows us to be able to sprint if we need to like escape, right? So like that's the way that our bodies are designed. But yet when we're in a situation where we shouldn't necessarily be feeling panicked, is that it then becomes difficult to breathe because because if we were running, then our breath would be like those faster, our heart rate going faster, and those shorter breaths is what we're doing to be able to keep ourselves going into that space. So like if you to be able to get us to the next step of what it is that we have going on.
And anxiety can be very debilitating.
It definitely can. And again, depending on the type of anxiety, because there's like, if you look at the spectrum, like there's a whole wide range of different levels of anxiety that you have, or the different components of anxiety. And so one of the things with that debilitation is it keeps you from doing the things that you would like to do. Something that other people may seem to think is like simple is going to the grocery store, which may not even be related to our trauma. Or if something as simple as just being able to go outside sometimes is something for some people is they can't even leave their house. And so it all depends on what it is that's going on for us, and being able to find ways of being able to cope with our anxiety and being able to move through it. And so that we can actually not be as debilitated with the things that are going on. And one of the things that I always remind people is that it's those small wins, right? So like if you haven't been able to leave your house because of fear of whatever it is that is keeping you inside, is if you can at least get outside your door, like that's a win, right? So just being able to like have those small things that allows us to be able to overcome some of the challenges that we actually have with that anxiety. And so and one of the things that that I also see with my clients is that it's like, well, I've gone through therapy, I've gone all through treatment, I thought I already had all of this stuff licked, and all of a sudden, for the last 6 months, I can't even breathe. I'm struggling with even being able to just do a normal functioning. And sometimes those past trauma experiences kind of come back on the forefront. Sometimes it's very evident. We know that something that has triggered us, but it could be something that's very mild that we don't even realize that is happening. And so it's just these small things that have actually been going on in our life. And when we actually take a step back and we look at it 6 months later, we can actually start to say, oh, that neighbor moved in next door, and that person was actually like, but it wasn't anything that was apparent, right? So like that neighbor was there, and that was when we go back and we look, and it's like, oh, that's what it is that's happened. And so that particular incident allowed some old responses, or some old memories, or some old physical reactions that we had just based on, and it could be something as simple as they're wearing the same type of shoes that somebody that we've been victimized by, if that's the case, whatever it is. And it could be something that is so ever so slight that we don't necessarily put our finger on it. And I think that that's probably where more people really struggle, is like, okay, where did it come from? I thought I had this licked. Why am I doing this again? And I get that a lot. And sometimes it's just that we need to deal with that one particular issue. Or it could be something that has triggered us that we're not even aware that has triggered us in the responses or in the situations that we have going on.
And that's where knowing your triggers really helps, or knowing how you feel when you get triggered really helps, because then we can kind of prepare, okay, I'm feeling triggered, my anxiety is acting up, I know it's because I'm triggered, and you can kind of link it.
Yeah. And I like how you brought that into the triggering, because sometimes, and like I said, sometimes we don't even know what the trigger is, but we know that we're triggered. So how can we move through the symptoms of what it is that's going on so that we can actually try and move past? And that's where my topic is about being able to move past that anxiety and move, excuse me, moving past it doesn't necessarily mean completely getting rid of it.
Right.
And I think that that's something that a lot of times people will struggle with, is that they think that they need to get rid of the anxiety entirely for them to be able to be well, but it's about being able to move yourself through that anxiety. How do I get myself from here to here so that we can actually move through that process and become more aware of what it is that we have going on. So being able to figure out what are those triggers, even if we don't know what the trigger is, what does that trigger look like? What is that trigger response happening in terms of being able to be able to overcome that?
Yeah, knowing what they look like, how they feel is like just one of the first steps though. But what happens when we're in the middle of anxiety, having an anxiety attack? How do we get ourselves out of that?
So one of the things is, so if we're in that middle of whatever it is one of the things that I always try and remind people is to, because we know that it's happening, and is being able to find a way of being able to get grounded. So one of the things that I know for me is that when I am triggered and I'm having a panic attack, is that if I actually pay attention to my body, I'm on my toes. And so if I'm in a standing position, I'm on my toes and I'm no longer in that grounded position. So then when I get conscious of that, then I actually make sure that I have my heels touching the floor and making sure that it has that all of my entire foot, so the entire base of my foot is like touching the floor. Even if I'm in my shoes, but like it's that whole, because then it allows me to be able to be stable in the space that I'm in. Being able to, so we go into that rapid heart rate and that shortness of breath, and just being able to just slow things down in terms of being able to just breathe and breathing into my belly. So being able to taking those breaths and being conscious of allowing my belly to be able to move in and move out. And as I'm talking about it, and I know that I get this a lot with people, it's like, okay, yeah, but like I'm in the middle of it, and it's about practice. So the more that you can actually practice before you get into a panic, and being able to notice like where's my footing, what is it that's going on, being able to focus on what's around me. So being able to connect with all of your five senses is so like, what am I smelling? What am I seeing? What am I touching? Like, and in touching, not necessarily with our hands, but like, where are my feet touching? Where is my, like, how's my clothing feeling? And just being able to make sure that you're actually getting back into your body, because when we are in panic or when we are in anxiety, we're in our head. So it doesn't matter what it is that's going on or what it is that's happening, we always go into those thoughts. And if we can manage to get focused and bring the awareness away from the thoughts, allows us to be able to get back into that space. And that's why one of the things that I am pretty good at now is being able to, and that's what I said, is being able to notice my feet. So other people, that may not be one of the symptoms, the physical symptoms that they have those responses to, but a lot of times even when we're sitting, right? So like if that panic attack happens and I'm sitting in my chair, I'm like ready to flee, right? So I'm either ready to flee or I'm sunk back like really far. So then bringing my posture up so that it allows that airflow to be able to go up. And so, because something as simple as just straightening your back, because if you're like crunched in, you've got very little way of being able to bring in that air. Or if you're ready to run, well, then you're out, right? So being able to just straighten it so that you have that straight back. And I know that in school we were taught like, okay, you have to have better posture, or like your parents would be telling you these things. And that is because like it does really make a huge difference in terms of your flow, in terms of how your breathing is actually going to be able to operate. And it sounds really super silly, or it sounds really super simple, but when we're in that moment, it's not simple, and it's not something that, so I will often have clients that will say to me, yeah, but like when I'm in that moment, like it just takes me right back to wherever, however, whatever those symptoms are, whatever it is that's going on. And then they start to beat themselves up over those symptoms. And so it's about being able to practice. So practicing the breathing. And so just something as simple as just sitting and being able to put your hand on your belly and watching your belly breath move, right? So being able to bring that air in and bringing that air out. Noticing when we just have our resting breath, is our resting breath always in our chest? Most people have their resting breath is in their chest. And so even people that don't have anxiety or have not experienced trauma, a lot of the times if you ask them to focus on their breath, they'll say, yeah, it's my rib, it's the upper part of my ribs that are moving, right? So most of us do not breathe enough into our bellies. So being able to just learn to being able to bring that relaxed state. And as soon as we start to get some oxygen into our brain, our body automatically relaxes. It doesn't matter what it is that's going on. So if you can master breathing, then you can help to be able to bring your body back into that homeostasis, into that calm state that you're struggling with, or that whatever it is that's going on. So breathing is probably the biggest strategy of being able to start with being able to get that going. And it's about practicing beforehand. So I know that if I'm in a panic state or there's something that's going on and somebody says to me, just breathe, what I want to do is like punch them in the nose. Like, seriously, I don't need you to tell me to breathe. You're just irritating me. Like, go away. So whereas with other people, some people can actually go with, and you can actually say, okay, just breathe. And so just being able to have, so if you have family members that are around or friends or people that are close to you, is that when you are in a panic state and they know that you're in a panic state and they're there to support you, is ask them to mimic the breathing, right? So just taking the breaths without telling you to breathe and just being able to just stay calm and just breathe. And then we just naturally start to mimic that from the other people that are around us. But oftentimes when other people are around and we're in that panic state, then they're trying to comfort us. They're trying to make things, and so they're agitated and they're not helping us. And so just being able to remind the people that we love and that are there to be able to support us is just, you stay calm and you breathe and you just focus in on that belly breath, and it allows the air and the area around us to be able to come into a more calming state. And so I think that that's probably the biggest strategy that anybody can have. And like, obviously there's lots of other things. So there's doing meditation and but when you're in that moment of panic, you can always turn to your breath, because your breath is always with you. It doesn't matter where it is that you go. I have a colleague who his go-to when he's sharing with people is when something is happening, is that he tells them to focus on their heart center. And by doing that and being able to physically feel your heart rate and your heartbeat will actually help to calm things down. I know that I've had other colleagues that will actually have you put your hand on your carotid and actually feel your pulse and breathe and allow your pulse to be able to slow down. And so that again, it's bringing you into that tactile, into that body, because if you can get into your body, you can actually get into the state. Putting your hand on your carotid is not going to help if you are somebody who focuses on all the illnesses. So like, that's definitely, do not use that technique. But because that's not going to help calm you, because it's going to be, oh my God, my heart rate is now at 120. Oh my God, now it's gone up to 150, right? So like, that's not going to calm you. But for some people, that is something that is calming, because then it allows them to be able to feel like, okay, I can feel it slowing down. If I continue to breathe, I can actually notice it going slower and slower and slower, and being able to bring ourselves back into that. And so, and I purposely named my conversation "Moving Past the Anxiety," because it's that, because we don't ever get through it 100%, right? So like, it doesn't 100% go away. We can learn to manage it. We can learn to slow it down. We can learn to be able to create a sense of sense of safety, where we can actually feel safe and that we can feel comfortable with where it is that we are at. But anxiety is normal. So it doesn't matter what it is that we do to try and get through whatever it is that's happening. If we are walking along the street and somebody honks their horn, we go into a state of anxiety automatically, because like, oh, am I like stepping out where I'm not supposed to be? Or like, oh, it's just somebody that's saying hello, right? So normally for most people, if somebody beeps the horn, we can actually then scan around and see what it is that's going on. But for those of us who struggle with that anxiety, it may take us into a different state as soon as we feel that panic. But because anxiety is normal, for everyone, it's how do those of us who struggle with that anxiety learn to be able to recognize the symptoms, be able to get out of our head and look around and see what it is that's going on, and are we really in danger? Because if there's really seriously a bear that's running up behind me, I need that anxiety to kick in, right? So it all depends on what it is that's going on, so that we can actually slow things down enough so that we can actually figure out, am I safe? What it is that's going on, so that I can then respond as to, like, oh no, it's just the neighbor's big dog that's behind me, and he's a friendly dog, and it's not a big deal. It's not the bear, right? So like, it's all these different things that allows us to be able to take us into that state. So moving past the anxiety isn't that we'll never have anxiety ever again. It's just, how do we slow things down? How do we bring ourselves back out of panic into a state of calm, more calm, like a lot easier. So like you talked about your having a panic attack yesterday. And so if you actually look back to several years before, your panic attack would come on and it would last like a really super long time, and it would be more difficult to be able to pass through, and then more thoughts would be coming into play, and then you couldn't get your body back into that state. Whereas likely for you now is that it sets you into a panic, whatever the circumstances are that were going on, but then you're able to pull some tools out of your toolbox to be able to bring you back into that calm state a lot faster than you would have. Whereas a lot of times when people first discover that they have anxiety, they end up in the hospital because they think they're having a heart attack, right? So because that initial panic is that because you end up with that, like, oh, my chest is going to like literally pop out of my heart is going to literally pop out of my chest. And so it's just being able to find and recognize, what does that look like for us? And how do we actually move through whatever it is that's going on in terms of our own physical symptoms? And being able to, like I said, being able to get ourselves out of our head and back into our body will help us come back into that state of calm a lot faster than it would if we stay focused on those thoughts.
That was a lot to take in. But it's so true. And you're right. You know, if I had had an anxiety attack or panic attack a couple of years ago, I probably wouldn't have known what it was. My anxiety didn't start until my husband died. So that's when I really started dealing with the anxiety attacks. But I knew what it was. I was able to pinpoint why I was having it. And change the circumstances. And as soon as I did that, I was able to come down.
Yeah.
You can't always do that though. You can't always pinpoint the circumstances. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I'm just feeling this way. For me, a lot of times I'll just go lay down and take a nap. And that'll work. That'll calm me down, and I'll be just fine when I wake back up again. But having those, like you said, having those tools, having the knowledge is key to moving past it.
Yes, it definitely is. And there are so many different resources of aids, of things to be able to like kind of help you through. So I know that a lot of times, depending on whether or not people are able to handle scents, is that I will often get them to, if they're okay with scents, is get them to get a diffuser that they can put some essential oils on. So when the panic happens, they can actually start to breathe it, and then it brings them into their senses. It brings them back into that sensory response again. And or something as simple as playing with your hands, right? So just massaging your fingers so that you're actually feeling all of the padded part of your hands. And then again, it brings you back into your body because you can actually feel that. And like I said, the feet is being able to get yourself into making sure that your feet are actually touching the floor, and changing your body positions. And so like there's a lot of different things that we can do to be able to bring ourselves back into that state of being able to get ourselves back into the body and outside of our head. And so if I'm in a panic mode, sleeping is not going to help me. So like that's definitely not going to help me because I'm ready to flee no matter what it is that's happening to me. So like I am not that, but I do have other people where if I just go to sleep, then it'll just be gone in the morning or gone in a couple of hours. And like, so like you, that you're able to do that. Whereas with me, it's like I'm ready to like run. Where am I running to? What is it that's going on? And how am I going to be able to? Or I'm ready to fight.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's my other thing. But either way, I'm not the freeze. I don't get the freeze response. Very seldom do I ever get the freeze response. It's usually the fight or flee. That I'm ready to eat. I'm ready to take action and kind of move forward as to whatever it is that's happening. So being able to slow things down is where I kind of get started.
Yeah, you just have to kind of go through the different modalities and tools and figure out what works for you and what definitely doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're all different. Well, Rollie, thank you so much for joining me on this. This was fantastic. It was a lot of information, but it was fantastic information. And I think it's going to help our listeners greatly with their anxiety when they have anxiety attacks. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Listeners, thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you in the next session.